we're going to have to go through a cultural environmental review of some sort, which we're excited about. We want to know what's there. So they'll bring in archaeologists, they'll determine, if there's mound structures there, if there's other structures that Native Americans used, if there's remains, anything like that. Number one, we don't want to disturb those things when we go and do the development that we're doing. But number two, yeah, we want to know, who was here before us. Most of us won't know that anyway. So, again, that's something that we'll do with Squirrel Hollow. Like I said, right now, we're not aware of any, hard evidence that there were Native Americans there, other than some accounts and things like that. But again, we potentially may find something there when we start to do that. So again, by about the mid-1800s, largely most of the Native American tribes had left Iowa, and European settlers from the east started making their way west. That doesn't mean all the Native Americans had left Iowa. You still hear some stories, newspaper articles and things about, there's one that comes to mind somewhere, I can't remember the location in Greene County, but there was a family whose the father had, I believe, went to Fort Des Moines to get supplies. They had just settled the area, so they didn't have a lot of supplies as it was. So as they went there, a flood came, the rivers came up, and he was not able to get back. So this family, this mother and her children were starving and didn't know what to do. Well, apparently a Native American came up and he was also hungry, asked him for food, and she showed him, we're out. And he said, well, do you have a gun? Yeah, I've got a gun. I'll be right back. So he took the gun, went out, shot a deer, and brought it back to the family and fed the family. So again, kind of hearing that type of stuff's kind of cool. There's a lot of those different accounts. Big kudos to the genealogy folks, the folks that have digitized a lot of this information from newspapers and articles of other publications. So it's out there. If you look hard enough, you can find it. There's some neat stuff out there too. So, Truman Davis was actually the first white settler to settle in Greene County from Missouri by way of New York. He staked claim to the first recorded settlement in Greene County, which is just about 2 miles south of Squirrel Hollow Park. A lot of you may be familiar with the centennial markers that we have across the county. Those things are awesome. I've been stopping and looking at them since I was probably old enough to walk around, when we're out fishing or hunting or whatever. I always stop around. Seems like I always find a new one out there somewhere. But again, when they came, there wasn't a lot of people over here. There wasn't a lot of, agriculture wasn't really a thing yet in Iowa. So these folks relied on the land. They relied on the resources that were there. So the really cool thing is many of the descendants of Greene County's first settlers are still here today. And I know some of you are in this room, which is really cool. So it's neat to be a part of it. So again, I talked a little bit about the rich resources and what made people stay here, what attracted people here. So by 1854, Greene County and the city of Jefferson were officially established with a recorded population of 150 people. It's hard to imagine Greene County with only 150 people. Fertile ground, abundant wildlife, and the mineral resources were keys to survival in the mid-1800s. Right about 1850 was kind of the end of, there's 3 periods at trapping that folks, they relied on trapping. They relied on furs, they relied on meat, and things like that, right up until about 1850. But it's likely that a lot of these early settlers had to rely on that type of trade to get by, to not only eat, to be able to make money as well. But many of the early settlers to the county settled near Squirrel Hollow. Again, the abundant resources, the river resources that were right there. A number of mills popped up, grist mills popped up around the area along the river as well. A few families back in 1856 and 1857 from the area organized Greene County's first subscription school at Old Rippey. Now I have a question, where's Old Rippey? We're not in Old Rippey right now.
No.
So is Old Rippey by the Old Rippey Cemetery or somewhere? Just shout out there. Like I said, I cannot find that information.
It's out here around, go to Hanneman's Road, which is you,
Okay.
and then
On E57 out to the second part of the S curve.
The second part of it.
Yes, and go straight, that will take you to the cemetery.
Yeah.
The city was right there.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. I have assumed that, but again, I don't like to make assumptions and put them in here and have somebody say, no, that's not right. But anyway, that's really neat too. Within 2 years after settlement here, we were already, again, settling the area, wanting to stick around. Obviously, we have school. subscription schools, I had to do a little research on that. We're typically the same as the schools we know today, but that's what they evolved into. A lot of these smaller subscription schools, country schools, evolved into the public schools that we know and love today. During the fall of 1881, Methodists in the area constructed the Pleasant Hill Church. That's about 2 miles north of Squirrel Hollow. A lot of folks know about Pleasant Hill Church. They still hold a Memorial Day service out there today, and a few other weddings and that type of things too, I believe, still occur out there today. So the other neat part about that is the old cemetery has the monument out there with the stagecoach tracks. The first, I believe, Sioux City to Des Moines stagecoach rail that went by there, that I'll talk a little bit about here in a minute too. So not only did the resources attract the good people, they attracted the outlaws. I guess you can't really say outlaws were all bad people. Some folks, they just needed to feed their families, so they went to whatever means they could do that. But in 1882, folks, cattle rustlers, actually stole cattle and concealed them down in the valley at Squirrel Hollow. I always thought that was kind of a cool deal. You just, when you look in the valley there, you can just picture these cowboys in there wrangling these cattle and moving them in and out and selling them and on and on. So it's kind of a neat thing when you're down in there to kind of envision. But again, that stuff did happen, and it happened right there at Squirrel Hollow. So just kind of goes to show it was a busy place back then. So we talked a little bit about kind of some of the plant resources and the other resources. Some of the stuff I found, early pioneer accounts stated that the deer and elk were in great abundance. They were everywhere around here until the winter of 1855 and 1856, which apparently was a very bad winter. The deep snow made it impossible and almost impossible for a lot of these animals to move around at all. One of the quotes in there was the numbers destroyed seems almost incredible. So you can imagine the amount of these creatures that were either killed or obviously for food and other resources and stuff like that. But you can imagine there was quite a few of them there too. There's even an account of this is right here in Greene County, and they were talking about children as these elk and deer would get stuck in snowbanks. They would go out there with clubs and club them to death, and then they would eat them. So kind of another neat little kind of graphic tale, but kind of an interesting tale about Greene County. So after 1855, 1856, that's kind of the last recorded account we hear of, at least elk in Iowa. Of course, we don't know what killed deer may come back, but there are no more elk in Iowa. They've become extirpated from Iowa, but we still do find their remains around. Right here, I've got a buffalo skull in the middle. On the left is a jawbone of what is believed to be the elk that has the antler on the right. These were found. The buffalo skull was found within 2 miles of Squirrel Hollow Park proper. The elk bones, I believe those were found up by Hyde Park. But again, these things can be found all over in the area, and they were abundant in great numbers at one time. And to do enough digging, you can still find these things out here.
I didn't understand. What is that creature?
Okay. So in the middle there, that's a buffalo skull. That was found in the river, found on the sandbar. And then on the right, that was an elk antler, and on the left is an elk jaw.
Interesting.
And we don't have them dated, we haven't had them dated yet, but a good way we found out to date them and pick them up, see how heavy they are. That buffalo skull weighs probably 25 pounds. I mean, it's heavy for a hollow bone skull, so we know that it's fossilized a little bit. So again, I can't really put an age on it, but it's over probably 400 or 500 years old. Same with the jawbone. The elk antler, not as much, but you can still, because there's a part of it that's kind of chipped away, you can kind of tell that it's partially fossilized as well. So we'd like to get a date someday and kind of need to find out how old they are. So back to Squirrel Hollow. Squirrel Hollow has always been a place to gather. Pioneers have been using it as a picnic area for many years. And again, the Des Moines stagecoach and Sioux City stagecoach route, like I said, the old road passes below the future park proper there, and with its proximity to the settlers that all settled in the area, and proximity from there to the church, some of the other landmarks in the area. It's been used, but like I said, Squirrel Hollow has been used as a picnic area for many, many years. Area families, like I said, some of your families, I know I've heard accounts accounts from some of you, as far as some different stories and things that will be in Squirrel Hollow for a number of years. And if any of you have any of those stories, I would love to hear them. And obviously we don't have time right now, but I will leave a couple cards, and you guys can email me, you can call me, whatever. These are living documents. This is a presentation that I hope to do many more times while I'm here, during my tenure here, but I want to keep building on it. I want to add things to it, and nothing better than first-hand accounts from some of you folks. So again, after you guys think about it, if you have tales, stories, let me know. I'd love to hear them. So sometime in the mid-1920s, local Rippey businessman, Benjamin Franklin Osborne, I'm sure a lot of you folks know a lot about him. I've learned a lot about him. Seemed like an interesting fellow. Learned that not only was he a pharmacist, I believe he was the dentist, and he was the surgeon, and he was the veterinarian, and that typical tale you hear. Really interesting individual. Well, he was kind of towards the end of his life by then, but another local of the Pleasant Hill area, not Pleasant Hill, Iowa, but Pleasant Hill by Squirrel Hollow, the church, proposed an idea for a park to the Greene County Board of Supervisors. County Supervisor Charles Wells and County Engineer S.J. Nelson soon adopted the concept. They thought it was a great idea. The biggest thing is, where do we get the money? In 1928, University of Iowa student William Hansen, he was actually hired to draft the topographic map of the area that locals know as Squirrel Hollow, and was able to do that with a lot of first-hand accounts, talking to a lot of the folks that lived around there, and really building on the fact that this has been a park for a long time. We just haven't really called it a park. So. At about October 29, 1929, a lot of you history folks remember the stock market crash, and the end of the Roaring Twenties happened, and so brought the beginning of the Great Depression. Well, that kind of put a damper on the future plans for Squirrel Hollow. They actually proposed to the state to make it a state park. Had some conversations, it never really came to fruition. Again, it was tough times. State parks weren't really doing the best in the 20s and 30s anyway. So again, that kind of fell through. Land suitable for park development was under private ownership at that time. Again, I think folks knew where they kind of wanted the park, but I don't think the landowners were really too satisfied with selling at that point. Again, tough times, and just what didn't all fall in place at that time. So what happened, planning for the new park would come at a standstill basically until 1933 when FDR took office and his New Deal for America. So in between that time, about 1931, Mac Elvin, local landowner, a local from down the Squirrel Hollow area, was drilling for water, and he discovered a 5-foot coal vein at 169 feet deep. And that's less than a mile south of the park. If you guys are ever driving south there, you go by the marker, and the mine was actually kind of set back in there a little ways. The Greene County Coal and Mining Company was created at that point, and the Greene County Coal Mine was opened that year and at its peak produced 400 tons of coal per day, which is pretty significant for the time. They employed quite a lot of folks from the area. Again, it was tough times, so if folks could find any type of work that they could get where they could make a few bucks, that was what they were going to do. So the coal quality that came out of the coal mine was low grade, high in sulfur, but it was good for burning, and since it was local, made it cheaper for locals, again, that couldn't really afford to outsource it from out east or have it shipped in from elsewhere. Kind of another interesting fact, coal can be locally delivered from the mine to a customer door for $4 a ton, so I would think that's a pretty good price. Back then, probably a little pricey, but I mean, reasonable for the time. The Greene County coal mine didn't really last a whole long time, about 12 or 13 years. Bad luck and tragedy seemed that every turn you hear something would happen, and I think that kind of goes with the territory of the coal mining. It is a dangerous profession, but in 1936, the winter of 36, a blizzard hit the area. It stranded 58 truck drivers and 17 miners in the Greene County coal mine. They didn't have a lot of food. Water was kind of already there, but they didn't have a lot of food and didn't know if they would be able to make it through. So February 9, 1936, William Van Horn hitched, I can only imagine what this looked like too, hitched 4 German Shepherds to a homemade sled, packed 150 pounds of food, and took off to Squirrel Hollow from Jefferson. Rode the river apparently the whole way there and made it in time, and none of the folks there passed, and everybody was okay, I assume. So, kind of about 10 years later, Andrew Zanotti, Joseph Strachan is actually the owner of the mine, but Andrew Zanotti was one of the partners of his, and there's actually a really neat write-up. I believe Mary did a really cool presentation on the coal mines as well. But I got a lot of information from there about the Zanotti and the family there. So apparently they were repairing some piping, a lot of water collected down the bottom of the line that they had to pipe out. So they were working on some piping one Sunday morning in 1947. The way I understood it, there was two elevators. They were using one of the elevators as scaffolding, so they had some stuff kind of stacked on top of it. And when the elevator was going up, I think some of the stuff had fallen off of the other elevator, hit the other elevator, the one elevator, hit the elevator that the two men were on, and they plunged. And apparently and unfortunately both perished at that point. It was really kind of neat though, again, reading a little bit about the Zanotti family and how after that happened, the community of Rippey, which I'm sure you always have,